You'll see some images as I give you some background information on books 21 and 22. And the woman in all of these images is Penelope, Odysseus's wife. And you see in the first statue her holding a bow and her also holding her heart, and that's representative of her missing her husband who has been absent for the past 20 years. In the second image, you see that Penelope was left to care for everything, and you also see that grief and longing on her face. While her husband was away, suitors, men who tried to marry her, raided her house and took from her all the food, all the wine. They're living off of her wealth. I mean, don't forget she is the queen of Ithaca, and her husband has been missing. So she's a very eligible bachelorette in their eyes. In the third image, you see that Penelope has spent time weaving during the length of her husband's absence, and this was a way she could keep the suitors at bay. She says, when I'm done my tapestry, I'll pick a suitor, I'll pick a husband, and she keeps weaving it, and then at night taking the thread out. And the men that are holding her flowers are just a couple of the 100 men who have been trying to marry her. Now I'll recap some of the main events from books 21 and 22 before you begin reading 23. Before beginning book 23, there are a few key events you need to know about books 21 and 22. In book 21, Odysseus has successfully returned to Ithaca after a 20-year absence. He does not reveal his identity at first when he returns to his home. He does, however, meet up with his son Telemachus and let him know who he is and that he's back. His wife, Penelope, has no idea that Odysseus is back. When Odysseus returns to his home, he's disguised as a poor beggar, and his wife is being pursued by over 100 men hoping to marry her in Odysseus's absence. They assume he's dead and never coming back. In book 21, Odysseus competes against the men and wins a competition that Penelope had set up. She was so frustrated and saddened by her husband's absence, she tells the men if they can string a bow and shoot an arrow through 12 holes in an axe head, they could take her as a wife. Well, book 21 explains Odysseus's plan to enter the contest and also how he successfully beat all of the 100 suitors. He does not reveal his identity to the suitors until book 22. In book 22, Odysseus and his son Telemachus, as well as 2 servants who remained faithful to Odysseus, mercilessly slaughter the 100 suitors. He locks them in the hall, and it's an absolute massacre. No one survives. Odysseus is helped with Athena during these events, and again by his son Telemachus. Book 23 is going to be the softer side of Odysseus, and it's going to explain his reunion with his wife, Penelope. Now, mind you, Penelope was not in the hall to see the massacre of the 100 suitors, but she does know that this man, this mysterious guest in the hall, this poor man, this beggar, was responsible for the death of the 100 men. So you can imagine how Penelope feels when this man approaches her. Now, we know it's Odysseus, but she has no idea. So book 23 is called The Trunk of the Olive Tree, and that's going to relate to something very symbolic and something very meaningful to Penelope and Odysseus. So make sure you pay attention as I begin reading Book 23. Odysseus meets Penelope. Now, we know that he's already her husband, but she doesn't know that. So Book 23 starts with Odysseus leaving the hall where the slaughter has just happened, and he's getting bathed, and then he's going to start speaking to Penelope. Great-hearted Odysseus, home at last, was bathed now by Eurynome, and rubbed with golden oil, and clothed again in a fresh tunic and a cloak. Athena lent him beauty, head to foot. She had made him taller and massive too, with crisping hair and curls like petals of wild hyacinth, but all red golden. Think of gold infused on silver by a craftsman whose fine art Hephaestus taught him, or Athena, one whose work moves to delight. Just so she lavished beauty over Odysseus's head and shoulders. He sat then in the same chair by the pillar, facing his silent wife, and said, "Strange woman, the immortals of Olympus made you hard, harder than any. Who else in the world would keep aloof as you do from her husband if he returned to her from many years of trouble, cast on his own land in the 20th year? Nurse, make up a bed for me to sleep on. Her heart is iron in her breast." So here, the opening explains that Athena has made Odysseus more powerful, kind of restored his strength, made him much more handsome, after those 20 years of hardship and seafaring and monsters. And he's being compared to beautiful armor that was made of gold and silver by the gods, because he seems refreshed, handsome, restored. And he begins speaking to Penelope, who is just very cold and distant from him, because Penelope doesn't believe that this is Odysseus. She just has missed her husband so long, hasn't seen him in 20 years, and is frightened by the behavior of this man, because he's just killed 100 men. So Odysseus is kind of chastising or yelling at Penelope, asking her why she's so cold, why she wouldn't take her husband to bed and embrace him warmly after him being absent so long. And now we're going to hear Penelope's explanation to Odysseus. Penelope spoke to Odysseus now. She said, "Strange man, if man you are, this is no pride on my part, nor scorn for you, not even wonder merely. I know so well how he appeared boarding the ship for Troy, but all the same. Make up his bed for him, Euclea. Place it outside the bedchamber my lord built with his own hands. Pile the big bed with fleeces, rugs, and sheets of purest linen." So you want to think about why Penelope may hold herself distant from a man who claims to be her husband, that she hasn't seen in 20 years, and who has just killed more than 100 men. Note that she expresses her doubt in the line, "If man you are." So she's still not believing this beggar is her husband. And she's telling one of the servants to make up the bed for this man. And the bed symbolizes lasting love between Odysseus and Penelope. And the way that their bed was made is a secret that only they know. Because one of the bedposts is the trunk of an olive tree that's still rooted in the ground, and the bed is unmovable. So you can question here why Penelope asks the servant to move a bed that she knows cannot be moved. With this, she tried him to the breaking point, and he turned on her in a flash, raging, "Woman, by heaven, you've stung me now! Who dared to move my bed? No builder had the skill for that, unless a god came down to turn the trick. No mortal in his best days could budge it with a crowbar. There's our pact and pledge, our secret sign built into that bed, my handiwork and no one else's. An old trunk of olive grew like a pillar on the building plot, and I laid out our bedroom around that tree, lined up the stone walls, built the walls and roof, gave it a doorway and smooth-fitting doors. Then I lopped off the silvery leaves and branches, hewed and shaped that stump from the roots up into a bedpost, drilled it, let it serve as a model for the rest. I planned them all, inlaid them with silver, gold, and ivory, and stretched a bed between, a pliant web of oxhide thongs dyed crimson. So here Odysseus is explaining how he handcrafted that bed. It couldn't move. He built the whole room and bed around a tree that he didn't unroot. He just shaped it into a bedpost and then modeled the other three on that one bedpost. And he explains that the oxhide straps that were dyed red stretched between the sides of the bed to form a springy base for the bedding. There's our sign, I know no more. Could someone else's hand have sawn that trunk and dragged the frame away? Their secret, as she heard it told, her knees grew tremulous and weak, and her heart failed her. With eyes brimming tears, she ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck and kissed him, murmuring, "Do not rage at me, Odysseus. No one ever matched your caution. Think what difficulty the gods gave. They denied the two of us life together in our promise in flowering years, kept us from crossing into old age together. Forgive me, don't be angry. I could not welcome you with love on sight. I armed or protected myself long ago against the frauds of men, impostors, who might come, and all those many whose underhanded ways bring evil on." So Penelope proves to be an able trickster. Her explanation here gives insight into the troubles that she's had to overcome during Odysseus's long absence. And she continues on line 426. Helen of Argos, daughter of Zeus and Leda, would she have joined the stranger, lain with him, if she had known her destiny? Known the Achaeans in arms would bring her back to her own country? Surely a goddess moved her to adultery, her blood unchilled by war and evil coming, the years, the desolation, ours too. But here and now, what sign could be so clear as of this our own bed? No other man has ever laid eyes on it. Only my own slave, actress, that my father sent with me as a gift. She kept our door. You make my stiff heart know that I am yours. So here, Penelope is contrasting her faithfulness to Odysseus, so she hasn't cheated on him, with Helen's adultery. And Helen was the cause of the Trojan War. And the reason Penelope and Odysseus have been separated for so long. So it's just an interesting little contrast that Penelope makes. And she's just driving in the point to her husband that no other man has laid in her bed. She stayed faithful to him over the 20 years. And think about Odysseus with Circe and Odysseus with Calypso. It's a little double standard there. All right, so line 439. Now from his breast into his eyes the ache of longing mounted, and he wept at last. His dear wife, clear and faithful in his arms, longed for, as the sun-warmed earth is longed for by a swimmer, spent in rough water where his ship went down under Poseidon's blows, gale or storm winds in tons of sea. Few men can keep alive through a big surf to crawl, clotted with brine on kindly beaches. Enjoy, enjoy, knowing the abyss or darkness behind. So here Odysseus is compared to a person who suffered a shipwreck, swum through rough seas, and finally crawled ashore covered with sea salt or brine, but rejoicing to have survived the ordeal. And so she too rejoiced, gaze upon her husband, her white arms round him pressed as though forever. So this is a very emotional chapter where Odysseus and his wife are finally reunited. And it's really important for you guys to go back and reread these lines of this chapter. It may be brief, it may be short, but it is packed with similes. It is packed with beautiful language and really shows Odysseus's love for his wife and her love for him.